Hello there, and welcome to day 136 of A Film a Day with me, Jordan Woodley. And as I promised yesterday, we are continuing or completing producer/fiancée Helen's list of recommendations that she wanted me to watch for the week, and the rather French tilt to the weekend with the Jean-Pierre Jeunet 2001 classic Amélie. And again, it's an opportunity for me to discuss a foreign language film, which, as I said many, many, many months ago, I did want to at least attempt to delve into, in spite of the practical restrictions that I personally have watching subtitled films. That being that with someone with a visual impairment, unfortunately, as much as I believe cinema should be international and people should get over the 1 inch gap of subtitles, on a literal level, that is more of a challenge to me than most others. But today we watched it, and it's interesting, I suppose, having Chocolat, which is I suppose at its core it is a French film, but it's directed by a Swedish director for an American audience. Whereas this is a truly, truly French film in so many ways. I mean, don't get me wrong, even amongst French filmmaking, this is unique. This is quirky to such a degree that it's not exactly the substandard of filmmaking, but there are just certain quirks to it and personality traits that are just so French. And I have to say, I appreciate I don't want to keep saying the word unique qualities that it has, because as I was watching it, I was trying to draw comparisons, things that I recognised. You know, there is something of the Wes Anderson, of course, the nature of storybook, and the way that characters are presented, and the way that they interact with each other, and the eccentricities of different personalities really had a Wes Anderson sort of feel to it. There was something of the Edgar Wright in terms of the editing and cinematography. I mean, there was even a little of the Darren Aronofsky of sort of in terms of accelerated time, the way people's perception, the real close zooms that you had on people, to the point where it's almost uncomfortable. The way the camera's used to almost make you feel uncomfortable at certain points. It has all of these sort of tinges. It's not completely new and unfamiliar to me, and yet within that there is something, you know, remarkable in it. I mean, I have to say that thinking about stories, and this normally relates to books and novels, that I have always loved different mechanisms for for exploring character and story. I remember growing up reading things like The Palaces, which of course I loved the idea of stories that chart characters over generations, and you see the same characters but they are at different points in their lives, and you chart stories as it goes decade by decade by decade. Also, what's it called, The Story of the Five Towns, which I read last year. Or similarly, something like One Day, the idea of charting someone, two people's lives on the same day every year over decades. But then similarly, and this is really what I kept thinking of when I was watching this, was I remember growing up and reading Dylan Thomas's Under Milk Wood several times as a kid, and it's only watching this that it came back to me. That sense of, the time aspect of it isn't relevant. You are simply following, someone across the course of their life to get a perspective on it. Whereas Under Milk Wood is all about the setting and the idea that you are looking at a selection of people over one single day, and yet in that one day you get all of the sort of prospect of who they were, who they are, and who they will be in their lives, and how their stories intertwine. And if you replace the setting of Under Milkwood with the character of Amélie, that's really where this sort of has that sense of intertwining stories. I mean, this is all about the sort of deconstruction of story, and the idea of someone who I suppose perceives the world as though they are a narrator in society, and yet they are still a person, and that conflict, I suppose on some level, and it again relates to Nick from Under Milkwood, Nick from Great Gatsby. See, I've got Under Milkwood on the brain now. But that sense of someone who wants to be in the world and yet constantly feels like an outsider. And yet her character links all of these stories, and her life touches all of these lives. And you get such a sense of time and place and setting. There's just something about it that really gives you that I don't know, really the sense that something can be relatable, I suppose. You chart someone's life. You meet Amélie. I mean, the story starts at the moment of her conception, and it relates it to all the tiny little events that could also be happening in that very moment, from the buzzing of the wings of a blue bottle, and then you see her life, and yet all of it's presented in almost like a kooky, like I say, Wes Anderson style way, where it's not trying to be funny, and yet you want to laugh, almost out of discomfort sometimes, because some of it's tinged with such pathos and sadness, and yet the cinematography and the way the narrator talks to you never tells you it's sad. When her mother is killed by someone jumping off a church and landing on her, again, it's almost on the cusp of being dark comedy, because it's, again, you want to laugh and yet you don't want to laugh. And there's something about that that's so, like I say, detached, where Amélie, you get that sense where she wants to be part of the world and she wants to feel things, and yet she's terrified of feeling and being connected, because she never got that opportunity to feel that human connection. But as I say, in contrast, her whole story is about human connection and how lives touch each other, and how in some ways we're all isolated. You have the story of a man whose bones are so brittle that he can't go out, and yet he expresses so much through painting and what he observes. Or a woman who very much like Miss Havisham's life froze at the point in which her philandering thief of a husband disappeared, and then she was told he died, and yet that sort of kept her sort of in amber for the rest of her life to that point. Or a man who has the same sort of clockwork lifestyle, and yet something from his childhood awakens the fact that he doesn't have a relationship to his daughter or to his grandson. And you really get that sense of everyone feels isolated and disconnected from the world, and yet wants to be part of it. And so the regard that Amélie, though she thinks that she's alone in this, she's not, and she is one light amongst a series of interconnecting lights. And I think there's something truly beautiful about that. And again, there is something in, the film uses the cinematography to create that sense of, and as I say, the editing and the accelerated camera work to really create a sense of interconnectedness and personality to it. I mean, as I say, there's something very French about the language within it, excuse the pun, I suppose, in terms of, the way that it talks to its audience, the way that it expresses things, the way it wants you to understand. And yet, in other ways, there's something very, like I say, there's something very Wes Anderson in that respect. And of course, as I've mentioned, all this intertextuality between all these films and filmmakers and novels, that, as I say, this is a story about stories, and yet this is a story about lives. And a quote that I've always loved is, stories are made up, life is made up of stories, not atoms. And I think this very much is within the school of that. So yeah, I think it is truly a beautiful film, and remarkable, and it's definitely one I'm going to be thinking about for the next couple of days. I don't know what it is about Sundays between this, Dancer in the Dark. I keep coming across films and I sort of have to chew on for days and days and days, but hopefully in a good way today. So anyway, thank you for joining me. If you like the video, please hit the like button, comment on the video, and share the video, because those help me in the algorithm. And please do check out my back catalogue of videos. Also, follow me on Twitter at Jordan_Woodley, where I'm always tweeting about movies and TV shows, and I share the links to these videos once they're uploaded. Thank you for joining me. Take care.